Hi, everybody, and welcome to our next Faculty Perspective interview. In this video, we're sitting down with SFCC instructor Ira Gardner and SCC instructor David Prins, and today we're talking about instructional video, and not just using video or things that you might find with your publisher materials or out on YouTube, but instructor-created instructional video. So welcome, guys.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Ira, how about you tell just a little bit about how you got started creating video for your classes?
I got started with videos kind of out of a necessity as I watched student behavior changing over the years. I was noticing that there was a generational change in characteristics where I teach photography and digital media production, and what was surprising to me is students were struggling to go out and do homework. They were much more comfortable in a group setting of the classroom environment and struggling with the independent work. And so I started thinking about how can I flip the classroom and give them the lecture material online, because I know their behaviors are such that they're watching a lot of YouTube videos, a lot of Facebook, social media, etc. So how could I can't change the system, but I can change what I put in their system by developing the lecture materials that were accessible to them away from class, so that we could actually spend the time in class actually doing the work, being more lab-based, more activity, hands-on learning. You hear that a lot with students. And so for me, it was out of a way to try to meet my students where they are and to help them grow a little bit more in the classroom.
Yeah. Can you talk just a little bit more for people that haven't used that term or heard that term of the flipped classroom before?
So the idea is getting away from being the sage on the stage. And I love a good performance piece for my students. I love giving lectures and that sort of thing. But the reality is, when you think about students only remember about 10% of what you say, and they remember 40% of what they see, and they remember 80% of what they do or have a meaningful experience. And so the idea of flipping the classroom was to create a way in which the traditional lecture, that material is digested online, so that when they come to class, it's much more engaging with classroom discussion, or they've tried something and we're actually working on projects together. And it's really interesting. It's very unnerving when you first do it, because when I have a really successful class, you almost wouldn't know it, because they come in and they just sit down and they start working and they start talking, and it's just a different environment, as opposed to my students waiting for the performance, waiting for the lecture. So it allows a little more learn at your own pace, and then changes the dynamic in the classroom.
Yeah, because they're not waiting for you to do something. They're coming in and doing something.
Yes, exactly. And so you see those, Maytag commercials sometimes where the person doesn't have as much to do, but the quality of interaction is so much better, because they're not waiting for me to perform, and I'm not hiding behind or waiting behind the material to present. It's I'm out in front, they're out in front, and let's meet in the middle and work together.
Mm-hmm. And David, how about you? How did you come around to start using video in your classes?
Yeah, for me, it started just really with as I was researching. I remember for some lectures, as I was a new teacher, as is pretty typical, often I found myself on YouTube listening to other people teach concepts. And I remember stumbling across this one guy. In fact, I think he was on campus a couple years ago, Paul Anderson from Bozeman Science. And I was watching one of his YouTube videos, and I was just totally amazed at how he was able to deliver his content online. And I was totally engaged in what he was doing, and I thought, man, I could really do what he's doing. And so I just started doing research on screencasting and on delivering content online. And I was really following him in particular, and looked at his methods and the stuff that he was using, and I kind of went with it. The second reason that I really started doing it was almost out of necessity. We teach a lot of classes in our department in kind of a limited amount of space, so we run into all these scheduling conflicts. And it just turned out that it was not totally out of necessity, but it was really encouraged to kind of try doing hybrid and online material for that reason. So it made scheduling easier for us in our building.
Tell the viewers a little bit more about what a screencast is.
Yeah, so a screencast is you just use a program on your computer to record what's happening on the monitor. And it's a really excellent way to, I think, communicate ideas. You can pull up like a PowerPoint slideshow and you can record that using screencasting software. You can pull up videos. Sometimes you can do a whole lot of stuff with it, really. But it's just a way of capturing what's going on your computer screen.
Yeah, I think the screencast, when that technology became available, is just one of the most flexible kind of things there is for teaching online, especially because anything that you would do on ground, if you think about the student experience of an on-ground course, the students are seeing and hearing you. The students are seeing whatever you put up on the screen, slides or documents or anything like that. Mm-hmm. And with the screencasting software like Panopto or like some of the other software that you guys are going to talk about today, the students in the online situation are getting that exact same experience. They're seeing and hearing you as the instructor. They're able to see your screen and materials as you talk about it. And it's just, so far, it's probably the most authentic way I've ever seen for delivering instruction online.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
One of the reasons I went to this technology was also to switch my classes to be hybrid. And I just found that if I made a promise to my students that the only thing we're going to meet for in person is to be really focused on the most important things, that it's easier for them to commit to being there. I saw attendance issues go down. People are showing up more frequently. And so that was part of that, not making them wait. And in terms of, okay, a 5-day, 50-minute class, we're having to piece it out a little at a time. When if for applied skill type courses like I'm teaching, it really is nice to have a 2-hour block of time is about the right amount of time to actually dig into something and try it. And I think, we live in an era where our students have 24/7 access to facts. And so a lot of what I'm trying to do is use class time to provide inspiration, validation that what they're trying is worthwhile. And I think the one thing that our students coming through are missing is that confidence they're afraid of failing. Mm-hmm. And so really the classroom environment has become this kind of nurturing environment where it's okay to fail, it's okay to try. And I just found that they were having a hard time doing that on their own away from the classroom.
Yeah. And I like your emphasis on making the best use of the time, maximizing the value of any kind of synchronous class time. We talked about this a little bit a couple months ago when we talked about Zoom and, synchronous online, but the same is true when it's synchronous on ground too. Anytime that you're asking a student to adapt their schedule or to be at a certain place at a certain time, we want to make sure that that's valuable time. All of our students are very busy, especially at the community college. But even at a traditional university these days, students are working, jobs, and very rarely do we have that full-time student that's all they're doing is being a student. Right. So I like that ability to really maximize that classroom time.
I think it honors that students learn at different rates and different frequencies, mm-hmm. and that this allows them to be in control of that a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I think the flip side of that very same thing is that you do then also have a backup or you've created some flexibility for if a student is absent or if a student has a time when they can't make it to class. Ira, you mentioned that you had an experience like that last semester. Or, with the weather.
Well, I had one just this week. I mean, we had a snowstorm and schools were delayed, and many of my students have young children that are school age, and so there was a weather delay in their schools, but we were still open. And so, what do you do on those days when half your students aren't going to be able to make it into campus? Mm-hmm. Well, what I was able to do is create a Zoom video chat room where students were able to check in. So I had students come in person, I had students online, and everybody was able to check in and get the help that they needed for that day. So I'm really to me, the Zoom and the synchronous learning opportunities that support the asynchronous is so exciting to me. Like, now we've got all the pieces.
Mm-hmm. So Ira, you mentioned the flexibility of schedule and maximizing time. David, what other benefits have you seen to your students of once you've started using instructional videos?
Yeah, I think you're right. I definitely say that's the primary one is the students are really challenged in terms of their schedules. Yeah, they're extremely busy, so allowing that flexibility is great. Other things that I found, there's this, I think there's something about redundancy of content that I really enjoy about the online aspect. So, but I see my students in a couple different aspects. I have labs with them, then I'll have lecture time with them. But I find that if they hear information online and then I can talk about it again during lab, just that redundancy and kind of experiencing it in different medias, I see that as being one thing that I see as quite a positive thing with online lectures and online videos. So yeah, just this idea of repetition in different media, I think, can be a powerful thing for education. I also find that for me, I can allow students to experience kind of like what you're saying with your video editing that you do online and on screen. But I can actually take video content and zoom in on a plant or on a plant process. Like if I'm grafting a tree, I can actually take a camera and zoom in on exactly what I'm working on. And it gives students this perspective that they wouldn't necessarily get in the classroom because you're right up close. And so that, to me, that's the second really major benefit for what I teach when I record my online lessons.
I'm so glad you said that. So many times online learning gets held up to the standard of on ground, right? And say, well, people say, well, is it as good as on ground? And I think that what you just said was, you can, with this kind of video, you can give a more detailed instruction or a more detailed experience to your students that are watching the videos than you can even to the students that are in class that day. Mm-hmm. So there is that potential, there in some ways using video for instruction can actually be better, more detailed, more precise than even what we hold up as the gold standard of traditional classroom experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I agree, and I will just add in there though. What's interesting is I started out teaching, I think, what you'd really term more web-enhanced courses. They were face-to-face courses with a lot of online material and resources that I found, and I found a lot of great video tutorials because I like being able to hear and see, and I found that just didn't work for the students very well. And as I checked in with them, they were always struggling with the fact that there was always either too much information in the tutorial or not enough information, that it wasn't just didn't speak to them the way a class lecture would. And yet they, all the problems with the face-to-face of if you miss attendance, it really fouls up your access to the material because you missed it, right? Mm-hmm. And so what I found is when I started making my own video tutorials, the experience for the students improved dramatically because they're able to still maintain that connection with me as their faculty member, that they feel connected to the class more effectively. And then now when we add these synchronous Zoom chats on top of it, now it's just kind of the seamless transition between face-to-face and online and asynchronous and synchronous that is, I'm really excited about the results that I'm getting from that.
Well, and it really helps to bring the instructor back into that online environment where for so long it just really felt like a student material experience. The students interact with the online material and all you're there is to grade things every once in a while.
Like a correspondence class.
Yeah. And David, you mentioned the same kind of thing. Was it you got inspired by finding these videos from another instructor at a different school, and yet you decided to create your own instead of using other videos that you found? Can you tell more about the benefit or why you decided to do that?
Yeah, I think it's so important to have your personality stamp on your classes, no matter what they are, if they're online or on ground. And to me, online video is just the way to do that. I think that, in addition to like chat groups and I think like Ira, what you're saying, having, you know, Zoom conference meetings, these are all like incredible ways to kind of put your own personality on classes. So yeah, I love the fact that I can shoot a video of myself or a lecture or whatever, and I can really put my own personality into it. And I think that helps connect with the students in that online environment a lot.
Yeah. I'm going to offer up a statistical piece of information in support of what we're talking about today. I got to the end of last quarter, and I won't tell you that doing video lectures and online chats makes your job any easier. It's really hard work, but it makes the results better. Mm-hmm. And I got to the end of the last quarter going, you know, this was a really challenging quarter, but I feel really good about it. The student work was incredible. And I was so amazed by it. I needed to research you know, was there some concrete statistics I could look at? And I looked at a course that I taught 2 sections of last quarter. So not just one class over another class. I had 2 sections. And the previous 2 years, the DWF rate was between 24 and 26% for that class. Last quarter, teaching 2 classes of the same exact course, the DW rate was 5% and 7%. Mm-hmm. And I think the major reason was the materials were fully developed, and the sequencing of the materials and just fully developing that flipped classroom made the difference.
Yeah. And for people that don't know, DWF is draw, withdraw, fail.
Yeah. Well, it's basically any student that achieved less than a 2.0. Okay. And here's the most exciting. I had 0 failures. Mm-hmm. So my failure rate dropped to 0, and my DWF rate dropped to 5 and 7% respectively between the 2 courses. Mm-hmm. And I really attribute it to the finding the right balance between the online, the video lecture material, support material, and then also finding the right balance between all the modalities. And I think, you know, we may get into that a little bit more, but I think one of the things I'm excited about using this technology is the universal design benefits that it provides. So my next step in my progression is actually to have transcripts of all my video lectures, because I am finding there are some students that are it's more effective for them to be able to read it as to just hear it. And so that's the next progression. But in my course design work, I'm getting a kind of a harmony between textbook readings, video lectures, synchronous chats, and then face-to-face activities.
Right. Yeah, good point.
Yeah, I want to echo that, because I find that it is really important to balance all those things as well. And I really like the fact that I can see my students, you know, personally in lab, and then they have, you know, this online chunk of video that they do, and it works really well. I think you're right on with that idea of balance, Ira.
Well, and I think you've hit on a couple different factors here. So you're dealing with maximizing student time. You're dealing with the idea that students can consume material not only at their own schedule, but their own pace, right? So if they need to review, it 5 times, you know, that it's going to be the same. If someone asks me the same question 5 times, you know that the 5th time that answer is just going to be a little bit more snarky, right? You get a little bit tired of answering the same question over and over, especially when I was teaching K-12, right? The video is going to be exactly the same every time, you know? And then that idea of different modalities of I can see, I can hear, I can look at the transcript. So you're, again, accessing it on so many different ways, all through one kind of tool, getting multiple different benefits. David, any other, how are your students responding to these videos?
Yeah, I think really positively. I remember when I first started, one of the things that kind of sticks out at me was when I switched from doing just traditional screencasting with just a slideshow to actually incorporating a little video window in that. I heard it all the time from students how engaged they were when that was kind of added to it. So yeah, students seem to be positively responding to it. I think they really enjoy the increased flexibility, like we already mentioned. Yeah, and like you said, the pacing that they could do on their own,
Yeah.
they can use their own pacing is great as well. Yeah.
Well, and students don't realize it, or maybe they don't always say it, but they do. They enjoy that connection to the instructor, and they need it, right? I mean, that's, I think, one of the things
we
that
need it too.
We need it too.
I
yes.
need that connection. Yeah,
yeah, because I know that I've had that experience where you get into a couple of years into teaching online and you start feeling disconnected, right? You start feeling like I'm not enjoying this anymore. This isn't teaching. I'm just facilitating. And I realize that's because I'm not connecting with the students. I don't know them. Have you guys just been using video long enough that you're starting to reuse your own videos? Have you had that experience yet?
Yeah, I personally have. I'm kind of in, I'd say this is like the third year that I've really started using them, and I do find that I want to keep it fresh, but at a certain rate. I mean, it takes so much time really to develop these things at first. For me, it takes a huge amount of time. So, I mean, if I weren't able to use it for at least a couple times, then to me, it wouldn't be worth it. I feel like I have to reuse it. And in some ways that's nice too, because I can take like one class at a time and really focus on it. And then the next year I can start on a different one. And, so yeah, I have started reusing my material, and it's been really great. One thing that I do find that I have to do is just make sure I go in and watch each video every year. I've kind of am a bit ashamed to admit that there have been times where I've just posted videos and haven't watched it, and then I kind of forget where the students are at, and that's not exactly at all. So I just have to be intentional about continuing to rewatch and stay up to date on the material that I created too.
And I think that's one of the places that this starts to pay back. If you think about technology as an investment, you're putting time into this product of this instructional video, and then you hopefully want to be able to get some return on your investment, right? And you've both mentioned that teaching online is hard work, and video especially takes time. It's not necessarily hard, but it's time-consuming work. But then when you have a product, if it's a lesson that you teach every quarter, now I've got a nice product that teaches that lesson every time, right? And if it's not something that changes, I was working with a math instructor, this theory or this formula is never going to change in this person's career, right? So let's make a really nice video that teaches that formula. Then you never have to teach it again, right? Other aspects of your course you want to keep fresh, weekly modules, those kind of things, module overviews. If you break your instruction up into small pieces, some of those pieces never have to change. And so you can start getting some payback on that investment of time.
Yeah.
It's funny you bring this up. It's perfect timing, because I've been thinking a lot about this, about what are the videos that I really have the longevity, the shelf life, because the concepts aren't going to change, and that I just really want to invest the time to make it the best presentation I can. And those are the ones I really need to spend the greatest amount of time producing. And then there's the second tier, which is I'll do videos in response to a period of time grading student work, where I'm like, okay, here are the common threads here. I want to do a little follow-up video to address this particular class and their particular needs. And so I'm not going to spend as much time on production value of that. I'm just going to be a little bit more, that might be only used once, so to speak. And then, now we're adding the question and answer chats, which can be recorded and posted as well. So there's kind of these different tiers of video production that I've started to identify. That is going to make it more manageable. And I would advise anybody out there that wants to start doing this, just focus on one lesson, just maybe one lesson for the next quarter that you try, and get comfortable with it. Don't try to do a whole class at once. That was kind of my biggest mistake, is trying to bite off too much.
Yeah. What are some of the challenges? So we've kind of talked about the benefits and some of the cool tools that you play with. What have been one or two of the major challenges that you've seen?
I think for me it was just the initial like getting into it and understanding how to use the software maybe was one of the bigger challenges. I guess maybe it was just like getting the courage to almost to do it, and then learning the software. I think there's, like I mentioned, that, you know, the perfectionist mentality. The first time I did it, it took me hours to figure out how to do everything, and I was kind of scared to push the, you know, the publish button, because, you know, it's just not a perfect product always. So for me, that was the initial challenge that I experienced. And then I think we've mentioned too, like the connection with students in online learning is sometimes really, really difficult. It feels like it's lacking. I think I'm learning how to, just like Ira was mentioning, learning how to do it better with some of the technologies. But I think that's still a big challenge that I face. It's still not the same as teaching in class for me. And
teaching online is a specific skill, that's for sure.
Yeah. But it's really getting better, and I still do enjoy it a lot.
Yeah.
I think my biggest challenge is I still struggle with what feels like talking to myself as I record the material.
Yeah.
Because I'm somebody that really plays off the energy of the room, and it just really, I have to do a lot of extra emotional work to get up to make the presentation. And then I really appreciate what David said about the sense of perfection. I end up sweating over PowerPoint much more when it's going to be actually published on the web. Like, I just want the material to be just right. And so I think when is enough, and when do you just say it's time to be done?
Right.
So that's I'm getting used to it, but it's definitely a hard transition.
Yeah. And you both have mentioned this at this point, you know, the amount of time or the amount of work you can put into a video. And kind of, there's a spectrum of approaches to video that can be, you can spend a lot of time and really produce it and put titles and arrows and, you know, edit out every little thing that you don't want in there. Or you can do something that's more off the cuff. Like, for example, Ira, you mentioned, you know, feedback kind of videos, you know, where this is a specific video just for this quarter. It's never going to be used again. No, I don't want to spend 3 hours editing that, you know? And so there's definitely a spectrum of use cases, and getting yourself comfortable with where your video is on that spectrum, and being comfortable producing just a rough recorded video is part of that as well. And
I also think for me, it's been about learning the limitations, or learning I think for me, at least, when I get excited about technology, I go all in, and like you were describing a little bit earlier, and I think I left some students behind because I thought this is the magic bullet. This is the elixir that's going to smooth out all the teaching, and it's not. It's one tool that I have to use in combination with all the other tools available to make sure I reach as many students as I can. This has been really effective for reaching some students that I was not able to reach before, that maybe were struggling with attendance, struggling with self-confidence, and it's worked really effectively. But I'm having to use it in concert with these other tools that you still need reading, you still need the synchronous learning opportunities, and so that's been a steep learning curve just getting into it.
David, if you had one tip for a faculty member that wanted to start producing their own instructional videos, what would that be?
Yeah, I would say just start with a small project, and well, maybe you could talk to one of us personally and get some personal feedback. But yeah, start small and just try and have fun with it. I think for me, like you guys mentioned, being excited about a technology of some sort. I'm super excited about, I'm getting this camera eventually pretty soon, a 360, or not, I'm getting it. The school is getting a 360-degree camera. I'm just pumped to use it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of giving me the motivation. So maybe if you could find something that gets you excited about recording an online lecture, then I think you should do that. Yeah. Find that.
Ira, same question. What would be a tip for a starter?
As I said earlier, I'd start slow, and then I would say the thing I'm most excited about this technology and this path is it's enabled me to fully express my personality and my strengths. It's allowed me to identify my weaknesses as an instructor, and it's allowed me to identify my strengths and strengthen that. And so there's something very revealing in this process. So, for example, right now I'm sitting in my home office, and it says something visually to my students if I'm doing a presentation where, oh, he reads a lot of books. Oh, he's got imagery. Like, this is his life. This is, it's a way we get to share ourselves. And I immediately was drawn to David's office, like the greens and the vegetable print in the background. It has some really nice opportunities for us to communicate non-verbally in some really nuanced, interesting ways that I think demonstrates or allows us to model what we're trying to teach, I think, a little bit more effectively. And that's why I really want to jump into one of David's classes and go out and look at plants. So to me, I think that the one tip is to utilize as many of these tools as you can to find your niche and find the ways that you can connect with your students the most effectively, that reveal yourself in a way that really models what you want from your students.
Yeah. No, it makes you a person rather than just information on the website, And if I were going to add my own tip, it would just be to start, like they've said, start simple, but just start by recording what you already do. If you're teaching on ground, set up a camera in your on-ground class and record that lecture. And now you've got a recording of that you can do something with. And over time, you'll find places like where you want to be able to do more editing or where you don't need to be able to do more editing. Grab your cell phone, grab a GoPro, grab anything that can record video and just start recording. And like we've said, there's so many benefits, instructor presence being a huge one, that even an informal recording establishes just as much instructor presence as a well-polished, well-lit, edited recording can. So just getting going, starting to record on an informal kind of track or an informal kind of way, and then you'll decide, like these guys have, that if you want to do more editing, or if I want to be able to add a screen capture, or I want to be able to do whatever, but you kind of don't figure that out until you start trying it. So grab a camera, start recording what you're already doing, even if it's not high def, even if it's not edited or anything like that. Just get that going, and I think you'll see some of these benefits starting right away.
I would even add, maybe you start out with, what is the most frequent question that gets asked over and over and over that you want to be able to just refer a student to that resource where they can get it at their own pace. For me, my first video was how to submit an assignment. Like, literally, what are the basic characteristics, whether the research component, what is the self-reflection component, what is their application, their try it stage, I call it. How do you do that? And how do you submit that work and build some habits with their students? And so for me, my videos start out with, what are the things that I don't want to answer in a face-to-face class because I've answered them 100 times over and over and over. That's where I started, and that's where I saw the biggest improvement initially for freeing me up to engage with students on more meaningful levels of learning.
Perfect. Very cool. Ira, David, thank you for spending your Friday afternoon with me and talking about using video in your classes. And I think hopefully the faculty will get some good information here. And these are two great resources if you have any questions, or come see Ben or I and we can help you out. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks,
Tim.